Welcome to Wrestling Throne. The professional wrestling landscape has undergone a seismic transformation in recent months, and at the epicenter of this shift lies one of the most dominant figures in modern sports entertainment history. Roman Reigns, the man who has held WWE's top championship for an unprecedented stretch, has been notably absent from programming, and this absence is creating ripple effects that extend far beyond what anyone initially anticipated. The Tribal Chief's dominance over the past few years has been nothing short of extraordinary, establishing him as the undisputed face of the company and the cornerstone around which nearly every major storyline has been built. The problem isn't simply that WWE is missing one of its biggest stars. The issue runs much deeper than that, touching on fundamental aspects of how the company has structured its entire presentation and narrative framework. For years now, WWE has built its programming around Roman Reigns as the central axis. Main events, championship pursuits, faction warfare, and even the development of other talents have all been filtered through the lens of how they relate to the Tribal Chief. This strategy worked brilliantly when Reigns was present every week, delivering compelling promos and engaging in high-stakes matches that kept audiences invested. However, this same strategy has now become a vulnerability, exposing how dependent the company has become on a single performer. When Roman Reigns held the Universal Championship and later the undisputed WWE Championship, his presence gave every show a sense of importance and stakes. Whether he was appearing on SmackDown or making special appearances on Raw, the championship picture felt elevated. The belt around his waist represented the pinnacle of achievement in professional wrestling, and every challenger who stepped up to face him was immediately elevated by association. The Bloodline storyline, with all its internal drama, betrayals, and family dynamics, became the most compelling narrative in wrestling. Fans tuned in not just to see matches, but to witness the continuing saga of this dominant faction and its complicated relationships. The absence of Roman Reigns has created a vacuum that WWE is struggling to fill effectively. The company has attempted to pivot and create new focal points for their programming, but the infrastructure that was built around Reigns doesn't easily accommodate a different type of main event scene. The wrestlers who are now in the spotlight are talented and capable, but they're operating within a system that was designed to highlight one particular star. It's like trying to run a different play with the same formation, and the results have been mixed at best. The ratings data tells part of the story, with certain segments experiencing noticeable declines, but the more significant indicator is the sense of directionlessness that has crept into some of the storytelling. What makes this situation particularly challenging is that Roman Reigns wasn't just any champion. He was a character who had evolved significantly over the years, transforming from a polarizing figure that fans rejected into a heel that audiences loved to hate and eventually into a complex anti-hero whose motivations transcended simple good versus evil dynamics. The Tribal Chief character worked because it was layered, featuring elements of family obligation, ruthless ambition, psychological manipulation, and genuine charisma. Reigns could deliver a 15-minute promo that advanced multiple storylines simultaneously, and his matches felt like major events regardless of the opponent. That kind of performer doesn't come along often, and replacing that presence isn't as simple as putting the championship on someone else. The Bloodline storyline itself has been forced to continue without its central figure, and while the remaining members have done admirable work in trying to keep the narrative compelling, something essential is missing. Solo Sikoa has stepped into a leadership role within the faction, but his character occupies a different space than what Roman Reigns brought to the table. The dynamics have shifted, and while this has created opportunities for other performers to shine, it has also highlighted how much the storyline was specifically built around Reigns' unique presence and character work. The faction feels different now, and whether that difference is ultimately beneficial or detrimental remains to be seen. WWE's championship picture has had to undergo rapid reconfiguration in Reigns' absence. The titles that he held for so long have been split again, creating separate world champions for Raw and SmackDown. This should theoretically create more opportunities and more main event level storylines, but in practice, it has sometimes felt like the company is struggling to make these championships feel as important as they did when they were unified around Reigns. The new champions are working hard to establish their own legacies and to make their title reigns feel significant, but they're competing against the memory of a title reign that lasted over 1,300 days and featured some of the biggest matches and moments in recent WWE history. The booking philosophy that WWE employed during Roman Reigns' championship reign was very specific. He was presented as virtually unbeatable, with his rare losses coming only under extraordinary circumstances or through overwhelming numbers. This made him feel like a final boss that needed to be conquered, and it gave real weight to his eventual defeat. However, this booking strategy also meant that many other talents were positioned as being a tier below Reigns, and breaking out of that positioning has proven challenging. Wrestlers who were presented as being unable to overcome the tribal chief now need to be elevated to world championship level, and that transition requires careful storytelling and booking that rebuilds their credibility in the eyes of the audience. One of the most significant problems created by Roman Reigns' absence is the impact on pay-per-view events. For years, WWE's premium live events were built around the question of whether anyone could finally dethrone the tribal chief. This created an automatic main event that audiences were invested in, and it provided a clear narrative throwline from one event to the next. Without Reigns, WWE has had to work harder to create marquee matches that feel like must-see attractions. While the company has succeeded in some cases, putting together a compelling card without the built-in draw of a Roman Reigns title defense has required more creative energy and hasn't always resulted in the same level of anticipation. The younger generation of WWE talent is facing a particularly interesting challenge during this period. Many of these wrestlers were developed and brought up to the main roster during the Roman Reigns era, which means their characters and their positions within the company hierarchy were defined in relation to him in the bloodline. Now they need to establish themselves in a landscape where that central reference point is missing. This could ultimately be beneficial for their long-term development, forcing them to find their own identities rather than being defined by their relationship to Reigns, but in the short term, it's created some uncertainty about how to position these performers and what stories to tell with them. The international expansion that WWE has been pursuing also factors into this discussion. Roman Reigns became a global ambassador for the company, someone whose presence at international events guaranteed media attention and fan interest. His Samoan heritage, his connection to the legendary Anoa'i family, and his status as the top star made him the perfect representative for WWE's worldwide ambitions. Without him available for international tours and special events, the company has had to rely on other talents to fulfill this role, and while WWE has plenty of international stars and globally recognized names, none carry quite the same weight in that role as Reigns did during his peak. The merchandising and commercial aspects of WWE have also felt the impact of Roman Reigns' absence. The tribal chief became one of the company's biggest merchandise movers, with his catchphrases, symbols, and character iconography appearing on everything from t-shirts to championship replicas. The "Acknowledge Me" slogan became ubiquitous within WWE's marketing, and the company built significant portions of its commercial strategy around Reigns' character and imagery. Pivoting away from that and building new merchandising campaigns around different talents requires time and resources, and there's no guarantee that any replacement will achieve the same level of commercial success. Social media engagement and digital content have similarly been affected by the absence of Roman Reigns. His segments consistently generated massive engagement across platforms, with clips of his promos and matches regularly going viral and reaching audiences beyond WWE's core fanbase. This organic reach was valuable for the company's digital strategy and helped maintain WWE's relevance in broader pop culture conversations. Without Reigns regularly appearing on programming, WWE has had to work harder to create viral moments and to keep the conversation going on social media platforms, which are increasingly important for reaching younger demographics and maintaining cultural relevance. The television negotiations and media rights landscape add another layer of complexity to this situation. WWE is in the midst of unprecedented media rights deals that have made the company more financially successful than ever before. These deals were negotiated with the understanding that WWE could deliver premium content featuring its biggest stars, and Roman Reigns was undoubtedly a central part of that calculation. His absence means that WWE needs to ensure that the overall quality and star power of its programming remains high enough to justify these massive contracts. The pressure to create new stars and compelling storylines is always present in WWE, but it's particularly acute now when the company needs to prove that it can maintain audience interest even without its biggest draw. The creative team within WWE has had to completely reassess its approach to long-term storytelling in Reigns' absence. The Bloodline saga was planned out months and even years in advance, with careful attention paid to character development, story beats, and the timing of major reveals and turns. This kind of patient, methodical storytelling worked beautifully with Reigns at the center, but it requires a star with his level of consistency and commitment. Building new long-term storylines with the same level of confidence requires finding performers who can carry that weight, and it requires the creative team to develop new narrative frameworks that aren't simply trying to recreate what worked with the tribal chief. The live event business has felt the absence of Roman Reigns in tangible ways. His presence at house shows and non-televised events was a significant draw, with fans willing to purchase tickets specifically to see the tribal chief defend his championship. The loss of that marquee attraction has required WWE to restructure how it markets and builds cards for live events, emphasizing the overall roster depth rather than relying on one or two major stars to sell tickets. This isn't necessarily a bad thing in the long term, as it could help develop a more balanced roster where multiple performers can serve as featured attractions, but the transition period has been challenging. Looking at the competition in the professional wrestling landscape, Roman Reigns' absence comes at a time when WWE faces more viable alternatives than it has in years. Other wrestling promotions are producing high-quality content and building their own stars, and some fans who might have been watching WWE primarily to follow the tribal chief's storyline may have explored other options during his hiatus. WWE's dominance in the industry is not seriously threatened, but maintaining that dominance requires consistently delivering content that keeps audiences engaged, and doing so without the company's top star requires exceptional work from everyone else on the roster. The nostalgia factor and the use of returning legends has become more prominent during this period, which is both a solution and potentially a symptom of a larger problem. WWE has always known how to leverage the star power of past legends to boost interest in current programming, but an over-reliance on these returns can sometimes suggest that the company isn't confident in its current roster's ability to carry the load. The balance between using established stars to create special moments and building new stars who can sustain long-term interest is delicate, and Roman Reigns' absence has perhaps pushed WWE slightly more toward leaning on familiar faces from the past. The women's division has actually benefited in some ways from the reshuffling of priorities necessitated by Reigns' absence. With more television time available and a need to create multiple compelling storylines rather than one dominant narrative, WWE's women's roster has received more opportunities to shine. This has resulted in some genuinely excellent storytelling and match quality that might have received less focus during the peak of Roman Reigns' championship reign. This silver lining demonstrates that the vacuum created by a top star's absence can sometimes force creative growth and provide opportunities that might not have existed otherwise. The tag team division has similarly seen shifts in how it's presented and utilized. With the Bloodline's dynamics changing and the need to fill programming time with quality content, tag team wrestling has occasionally received more spotlight than it might have during Reigns' omnipresent championship reign. The challenge is ensuring that this isn't just a temporary adjustment but rather a permanent elevation of how tag team wrestling is valued and presented within WWE's hierarchy. Building strong tag team divisions creates depth throughout the roster and provides more options for compelling television, which is exactly what WWE needs when it can't rely on one overwhelming star presence. The question of when Roman Reigns will return and in what capacity looms over all of these discussions. His absence isn't necessarily permanent, and WWE knows that his eventual comeback will be a massive moment that can be leveraged for significant storytelling and business opportunities. However, the timing of that return and how it's executed will be crucial. If WWE has successfully built new main event level stars and created compelling alternative storylines during his absence, Reigns' return can feel like an addition rather than a necessity. If the company has struggled and appears to be treading water waiting for his comeback, then his return might feel more like a rescue mission than a triumphant moment. The leverage that Roman Reigns now possesses within the industry has also grown substantially. By proving that WWE's business is noticeably affected by his presence or absence, he's demonstrated his value in the most concrete terms possible. This likely affects future contract negotiations, creative input, and the level of control he has over his character and schedule. The power dynamic between WWE and its top stars has always been complex, but performers who can point to measurable business impact have always commanded premium treatment and compensation. Roman Reigns' situation exemplifies this reality in ways that few other modern wrestlers can match. The comparison to past WWE eras when the company was similarly dependent on single top stars is instructive. There were periods when WWE built everything around Hulk Hogan, Stone Cold Steve Austin, or John Cena, and in each case, when those performers were unavailable for extended periods, the company faced similar challenges. WWE eventually adapted in each case, building new stars and creating new focal points for their programming, but the transition was never smooth or painless. The current situation with Roman Reigns fits this historical pattern, and if history is any guide, WWE will eventually find its footing and create new main event level attractions, but the process takes time and isn't without its struggles. The narrative possibilities that exist when Roman Reigns does return are extensive and exciting. Will he come back as a conquering hero reclaiming what he built? Will he return to find that the bloodline has moved on without him and needs to reassert his authority? Will he face new challengers who have risen in his absence and now want to prove themselves against the returning tribal chief? These questions create anticipation, but they also underscore how much of WWE's storytelling potential remains tied to Reigns even in his absence. The company is simultaneously trying to move forward without him while also keeping the door open for his return to be as impactful as possible. The training and development of future WWE stars takes on added urgency when the company's dependence on Roman Reigns becomes so apparent. WWE's Performance Center and developmental system exist precisely to create the next generation of main event level talents, but the process of developing someone from prospect to legitimate top star typically takes years. The current absence of Reigns reveals that WWE could benefit from having multiple performers at that highest tier rather than concentrating so much of its storytelling equity in a single individual. This is easier said than done, as true main event stars are rare and require a combination of talent, charisma, opportunity, and the right timing to fully emerge. The business metrics that WWE reports to its shareholders and investors provide another lens through which to view the impact of Roman Reigns' absence. While WWE's overall business remains strong due to its media rights deals and diversified revenue streams, any softness in ratings, attendance, or engagement during Reigns' hiatus doesn't go unnoticed by the financial community. WWE's stock price and market valuation are affected by perceptions of the company's ability to create and maintain star power, and sustained evidence that the company struggles without one particular performer could create concerns about long-term stability and growth potential. The international markets that WWE continues to expand into have different relationships with Roman Reigns than American audiences might. In some regions, his character and dominance resonated particularly strongly, while in others, different performers might be the primary draw. Understanding these regional variations becomes more important when WWE can't rely on its universal top star to anchor all international programming. The company needs to develop region-specific strategies and elevate different performers in different markets, which adds complexity to the booking and creative process but ultimately makes WWE's global operation more resilient. The streaming era and on-demand content consumption have changed how audiences engage with professional wrestling, and Roman Reigns' absence intersects with these changes in interesting ways. When fans can watch wrestling whenever they choose rather than being bound to weekly television schedules, the importance of must-see moments and compelling ongoing storylines increases. Reigns excelled at creating both, giving audiences reasons to watch live and to seek out content on demand afterward. Without him, WWE needs to ensure that multiple storylines feel urgent and important enough to drive both live viewership and streaming engagement. The production and presentation style that WWE has developed in recent years was in many ways tailored to showcase Roman Reigns effectively. The dramatic lighting, the special entrance arrangements, the way cameras captured his expressions and movements, all of this combined to present the tribal chief in the most compelling way possible. This production language now needs to be adapted to showcase different talents with different personas, which sounds simple but actually requires significant adjustments from the production team. Finding the right presentation style for new focal point characters is part of the process of elevating them to true main event status. The commentary team's role in establishing and maintaining the importance of storylines and characters has become more crucial without Roman Reigns dominating the narrative. The announcers need to work harder to convince audiences that the current championships, feuds, and storylines are just as important as what came before. This requires not only skill and commitment from the commentators themselves but also clear direction from the creative team about what messages need to be conveyed. Commentary can make or break audience perception of a wrestler's importance, and during transitional periods like this, that responsibility weighs even heavier. The psychological impact on the locker room itself shouldn't be underestimated. When Roman Reigns was the unquestioned top star, every other performer understood their place in the hierarchy relative to him. His absence creates both opportunity and uncertainty. Wrestlers who were positioned as challengers to Reigns now need to find new roles, while others see chances to move up that might not have existed before. This can create healthy competition and motivation, but it can also create anxiety about job security and positioning. How WWE's management handles these internal dynamics affects not just individual performers but the overall morale and culture of the organization. The relationship between WWE and its fan communities has evolved during Roman Reigns' absence in ways that reflect broader changes in how audiences engage with entertainment. Online fan communities discuss, debate, and sometimes criticize every creative decision WWE makes, and the absence of Reigns has intensified certain discussions about the company's direction and decision-making. WWE's ability to listen to fan feedback while still maintaining its creative vision is constantly tested, and periods of transition like this one tend to amplify both positive and negative fan reactions to storylines and booking choices. The burden placed on the wrestlers who are being positioned as the new faces of WWE is immense and deserves acknowledgement. These performers are being asked to fill shoes that may be impossible to fill completely, at least in the short term. They're working just as hard as Roman Reigns did, delivering quality matches and promos, but they're doing so while being constantly compared to arguably the most dominant and successful champion in modern WWE history. The fair assessment of their work requires recognizing the difficulty of their position and giving them time to establish their own identities and legacies rather than simply measuring them against what came before. Thank you for watching this deep analysis of how Roman Reigns' absence has created cascading challenges throughout WWE's entire operation. The situation demonstrates both the incredible value of truly transcendent performers and the risks of building too much around any single individual. As WWE navigates this period, the company's ability to create new stars, tell compelling stories, and maintain audience engagement without its top attraction will define the next chapter of sports entertainment. If you found this analysis valuable and want to see more content about the business and creative sides of professional wrestling, make sure to follow, subscribe and like.